All right. I believe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka Some Gadget Guy, the SGG of this horribly named podcast. But the Q&A is what we really care about. The question and answer is we have a more interactive conversation about the week of news. It's why I like to have my podcast on a Monday, is that we get to sort out some of our feelers, maybe some news broke over the weekend, and then also we get to follow up. I think it's always the most critical part of a conversation is really looking at the longer term aspects of how these stories play out. So I'm already seeing an incredible uh, list of folks here in the live chat. I'm seeing Lanny82. I'm seeing Ken Not Kaneki. I'm seeing Dave Burns, El Jefe Reviews. I'm seeing Loki Ted, Paul Puri. I'm seeing Gormlord. Gormlord is watching Star Trek The Next Generation for the first time ever, and they finally made it to the last season. Cassio Third, Aditya Anil, Nick Fell, Otaku, and Jim 72165 subscribed for a month on Twitch Prime. Thank you so much. Dank Pikmin God. I'm missing some other people in here. The chat is already moving. F Mooney saying hey there. Gabaletta and Kyoto Santi is also in the chat, giving me some thumbs up action there. So I think this is going to be an interesting show. We've got a lot of gadget block stories to kind of weave through. So in the second half of the podcast, talking about sort of reviewers who like to jump on bandwagons, some Pixel. It's not even news. It's Pixel non-news that blew up in a controversy that turned out to be nothing. Oneplus controversies. And then also, I just keep it in the brain, especially those of you who stick it out from the very beginning of the podcast. What your sort of final bets, your final Vegas odds on the spec sheet for the Xperia 1 Mark III, which we should be hearing about in a couple days. So there's going to be the Sony announcement on the 14th, and just kind of keep it in mind. I want to get a sense of what folks are looking for in an alt brand smartphone. You know, something like Sony probably isn't going to be a mainstream device, especially the Xperia 1 series, which is a very niche kind of premium tier phone. What does that mean? What do we want to see from that? Because we all know it's probably not going to be ranked very fairly by reviewers focusing on that average consumer who's out there shopping $1,000 plus phones. Dave Burns, for the Pixel, I believe it's called a non-traversy. Now, Dave is saying he wants the Sony, but we all know that Dave is also rocking a OnePlus 9. So what's it going to be, Dave? How we going to play this? Are you a Sony fanboy, or are you a Hasselblad fanboy? What's going on? Come on, man. Got to pick one. You can't have a variety of gadgets that fulfill your needs. You need to be all in on one brand. Chill. So, just as we normally start our podcasts, I hope everyone had a lovely weekend. If you caught me on TK's stream, or not TK's, I mean it's both of our stream, but the best of our week, it was definitely the TK show on Thursday because I was burnt out. It was ultra crispy one, and I got a nice recuperative, restorative weekend. It was Marie and I's 17th anniversary. Been married for 17 years. And so we went out to the Santa Barbara Zoo with Lex. I did a daddy-daughter beach day where Lex and I went down to Malibu. Then we also spent Sunday like mostly just like walking around and eating a ton of food. And it was a really lovely weekend. So not a lot of chatter. I didn't get a ton of work done. I was really trying to focus on some camera review stuff, but I took the time to properly unplug, spend the weekend with my wife. It's just so weird to think 17 years ago is when we said I do. And especially after the last year, because, you know, a year ago we were hardcore shelter in place, quarantine orders, not knowing what the world was going to look like. And it was really scary. And we were talking about it. Like, we genuinely cannot remember our last wedding anniversary. That's how much of a blur and how much of a mind kink this last year has been. We've been looking for photos. If we went out and played with Lex, if we tried to get some food, if we did anything, we can't find it. There is zero evidence of our wedding anniversary in 2020. And that's an unsettling thought. So I'm going to be kicking up a series of phone challenges. I'm less I'm less invested in this rush to week one review, week one review, week one review, week one review. And instead, I want to find more community building activities. First of all, for the Patreon, I'm still going to be looking at doing like movie nights and game nights for the Patreon. But then outside of that, if I'm going to preach this lifestyle of mobility where I want people to get more out of their phones, I think I kind of need to lead that discussion a bit more proactively. Instead of reacting and saying like, well, if you had this phone, you could be doing desktop mode. Instead, just trying the general, how do you push the limits on any smartphone purchase? And it's not just premium tier, it could be anything. And so one of the first challenges I'm going to kick off is it was kind of inspired by this conversation that I had with my wife about how we can't remember our last wedding anniversary. The wedding anniversary during the pandemic, a wedding anniversary under quarantine, like that's a diary entry that should survive, like it's just gone. That day is just vanished. And so the first phone challenge that I want to kick off is having people record a podcast with their loved ones. Talk about the last year. Use your phone. Just set up a memo recorder and talk. And I'm trying to reach out. Like what I want to do is kind of make this like sort of a fun crossover. Maybe this is a platform that we can also do some contests. So I'm talking to Rode Microphones about maybe just setting up a little prize. It's not going to be anything crazy. It's not going to be like one of their top of the line wireless labs or one of their studio grade mics, but one of their little smartphone mics. Like if you saw my Rode Vlogger kit, they make this teeny little boom mic that you can kind of just plug into the side of your phone. And so once I get just a little bit more word from them, because they seem interested, which makes me happy. Hopefully, maybe early next week, we'll have a proper contest and challenge video out where we can get people engaged. And again, I just want this expectation, like if we're going to spend even mid-ranger money on a phone, we should expect to get way more use out of it than the way that reviewers talk about phones, because this is just getting silly at this point. You've got like this laptop grade mobile compute power, and we can barely acknowledge that people might be trying to do more than social media on these devices. Let me nitpick, Pixel Peep and look real deep on the HDR. There's a lot more you could be doing with your phone. Oh, snap. A hype train is close. What? Gary the Fireman. Gary the Fireman delivering a bunch of tier 1 subs to Cassio Third, Snorkel Bill, Dank Pikmin God, Rusty Bob Dotka, and Muppinish. And El Jefe Reviews also subscribed for another month. He's on a 21-month streak, man. Thank you so much. And Gary the Fireman also kicked Aditya Anil an extra sub too. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much for supporting the content here and the production here, and hopefully. Whoa! Sorry, I just yelled into the microphone. Paul just dumped a bunch. Oh man. Okay, so Paul just gave a bunch of tier 1 subs to Arislan, Anod032, Theramins, Foika. I am mispronouncing all of these. Kirandior, JJ4884, Scrappy Coco, All Greg, Token Tech, 2 Turbo, and that just turned on the hype train. So thank you very much. We are now on the hype train. So well, thank you again. Thank you so much. You guys are kind of rocking my socks here. I'm going to keep going through the housekeeping, just to kind of get us through housekeeping. A couple news block stories, but again, like last week, I really want to focus a bit more on these kinds of conversations for the gadget block. There's a lot of stuff out there, and there are a lot of issues. What with sort of component shortages and price hikes and different industries kind of interrupting the flow of our gadgets. Like, our gadget purchases are getting kind of precious in 2021. So it's upsetting that we're still trying to play a lowest common denominator influencer game, and I feel that's warping the perspective of how we should be reviewing and how we should be talking about these types of consumer electronics purchases. So let's get housekeeping out of the way. Okay, here we go. Screen share. One of the big videos that I put out last week, Samsung versus OnePlus, who built the better phone this year. I'm looking at the OnePlus 9s versus the S21s, and it's still my assertion that the OnePlus 9 is a good fit against the S21. And the OnePlus 9 Pro is really more of a competitor for the S21 Plus. I do not believe that just because you can find Galaxies on more aggressive sales, that ignoring the MSRP is the right way to compare similar products. I feel if you're comparing a OnePlus 9 Pro against an S21 Ultra, you're mostly doing that to give Samsung a $200 plus advantage depending on what region you live in and how much these things cost in your area. When you really look at how these MSRPs are kind of the claims made by the manufacturers, I feel the appropriate comparison is S21 Plus to OnePlus 9 Pro. So I made a video with that as the sort of comparison mark. That's how I'm judging the dollar per value per consumer performance aspect of these two phones. Spoiler alert, I kind of feel OnePlus made the better phone this year. Continuing, this is going to be a common theme. All right, you guys landed the hype train. So we what is it? We just finished the level 5 hype train. Oh, you guys are rad. And Gary the Fireman also dropping a bunch of tier 1 subs. Raymondit, Roy, Tar Heels, Lanny 82, Pacostin. Yeah. Oh wow, you guys rock. Gary the Fireman, we believe the hype. I like the stock, man. That was great, guys. I love it. All right. Moving on with the housekeeping. This is our final form, Paul. You're absolutely correct. Oh, Dave Burns kicking a tier 1 sub to Freddy. Freddy M162. You guys are rad. Oh, I love you all so much. Performance is going to be a continuing theme in this podcast this week. Pixel 5 got an update for April, and it was tiny. It was like a 16 meg OTA. Real little software update. But there was like a little fervor over it because it apparently unlocked additional GPU performance. And that's kind of interesting. I don't normally do video on any phone. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, if I do a video on an LG software update, it's because those are usually fewer and farther between. We have an expectation that Pixels are updated monthly, and every other month we're getting these kind of feature drops that enhance the functionality of the phone. But this is one of the off months. This isn't one of the feature drop months. So, you run the phone. I ran the phone on testing it with synthetic benchmarks and then a couple of the games that I play, and it did. There was a noticeable improvement to the tune of 20% in synthetic benchmarks, which is a pretty solid jump. And so it really seemed to me that Google. I don't think Google got enough credit on the Pixel 4a's and on the Pixel 5 for really taking to heart some of the criticisms of the Pixel 4 and Pixel 4 XL. It's a lot of 4s and 5s and 4a's and 5a's. But the Pixel 4, one of the main criticisms was battery life. So the Pixel 5 launches, and it launches with a lower powered chipset and a larger battery. So bigger fuel tank and a more fuel efficient engine. I could imagine that their main focus was customizing the software for the best possible runtime. And so now that I think they've kind of optimized for this hardware a little bit more efficiently, they're looking at, well, maybe in a situation like gaming, compromising some of that battery life for more graphics processing could be a benefit for that consumer. If someone's playing a game, they're probably a little less concerned about the absolute best, longest running battery life in that moment. They probably appreciate a 10 to 20% lift in their frame rate. So that's what we have to kind of take a look at. And that's also what's frustrating, is because, it's really easy to demonstrate, oh, well, this update got 20% boost in the synthetic benchmark. Benchmarks are not real life. That is not the improvement you're going to see from game to game to game to game. And unfortunately, especially once we get into the more expensive and the more powerful phones, this stuff is getting increasingly difficult to track, to quantify, and to compare in a fair way, because every manufacturer is putting their own spin on these individual components. Kyoto or Asanti is saying I should hydrate, so I'm absolutely going to do that right now. F Mooney, what even is an LG? And then Dewey says, I've never heard of it. Raymond, yeah, we talked about this a little last year. A Pixel 6, no more Snapdragon. Could be really interesting if Google has managed to kind of make that leap into making their own SoC. And then wrapping out last week, just for my own production, UPerfect X, a laptop dock. Turn your phone into a laptop, and this is great hardware to do it. These laptop docks are so much stinking fun to play with. And just in continuing these conversations where I really don't believe that people are getting, I really don't believe that people are getting the value out of their phone purchases, either you should be spending less every year to get kind of the same tier of performance, or you should be using your phone more because there is more power, there is more stuff, and you're probably spending more with every successive year of premium tier phone. One of the best ways to do that is to legit turn your phone into more of a laptop. And it's still shocking to me how so much of the pushback I get from this idea comes from so-called tech enthusiasts. When I show my family and friends, like, hey, I'm not saying you should go out and buy $1,000 phone, but if you do, a couple accessories can turn it into a wonderfully capable desktop setup or laptop setup. They get it. They understand that. There is no pushback. It's not like I need to explain how computer work. They're probably not going to do it, but they at least understand that that's one of the benefits. That could be one of the perks if they decide to make that jump. I'll put out a video like this about the UPerfect X and like I'll get replies from people. Oh, well, I can't use that because there's this one Windows program I have. And like, yeah, I get it. You have a very specific custom software need that's not going to translate directly to using a phone as a proper computer. Cool. But then we also completely ignore like market trends where I've said this before on the podcast, I'm repeating myself, but Chromebooks, they're selling really well. You can't tell me that someone's whose needs are met by an almost entirely browser-based operating system is somehow going to be held back using Android instead as their main operating system with little apps instead of one big browser. This is the fallacy of trying to cut these reviews, hiding behind the shield of average consumers, and then ignoring the actual trends of the average peak of the bell curve, chunk of the population, what exists in the middle of the market. They have much different needs and wants than techies claim they do. All right. Gary, I don't get the zeros and ones. And Matt Tyler saying, hello there. Hello there, General Kenobi. All right. So performance was on the brain. I kind of wrote this up briefly on Sunday because I'm in and out of kind of testing and longer term reviewing. I need to reshoot some of the stuff for my camera review for the OnePlus 9. I missed a bunch of my night shots. I was out late at night shooting low light photography, just jamming on a podcast, and completely missed like two of my major setups. Like the selfies. So I need to go back out tonight and reshoot those. Not reshoot. I need to shoot them in the first place because I didn't shoot them at all. So I got one photo with the OnePlus 9, got like kind of jamming in this podcast, and then like totally left. The one photo I got from the OnePlus 9 in ultra low light conditions, I'm not worried about a lack of OIS. I kind of feel if you can't get good shots out of a OnePlus 9 in mixed lighting or in low light conditions, that's more you as a terrible photographer than the phone. The phone is proving to be solid. Obviously, you can do a little bit better on a OnePlus 9 Pro. I don't think anyone's going to be held back much on a OnePlus 9. So, Nick Fell is saying, I think people feel attacked and feel you implied that they should replace their Windows machine versus supplement a Windows machine. I sure as hell can't do my work on a laptop dock, but I could replace my laptop probably. So here's the fallacy of that. If someone is so sensitive about me saying a phone can be a proper computer, and then they completely ignore the conversation I just had, mentioning things like moderate to high consumer grade use, and that's what they feel I'm attacking them for, I can't talk to those people as techies. Those snowflakes are too sensitive. I'm not going to extend an olive branch to try and pat them on the head to spoon feed them that there are people who are different than them. This is one of the major... So, okay, I put out a poll on the OnePlus 9, and it's are you being affected by OnePlus 9 performance slowdowns or throttling, or is your frame rate capped? And I have 3 options in there. I am talking to OnePlus 9 owners. I'm not really interested in someone's thoughts on OnePlus 9 performance if they don't have a OnePlus 9. They don't own the phone. Their opinion on the performance is kind of irrelevant. I've gotten numerous comments. You need to give us an option on this poll for the people who don't own the phone. What are we doing? What's going on? So if I'm describing actual consumer use on a laptop dock with a phone, I am desperately trying to reach people who don't have the money to own a nice phone and a nice computer and an extra laptop in the house for their kids and tablets just for the family fun entertainment and a really nice TV and a game console so that their smartphone purchase is only this one thing. Right now, someone is trying to balance a tech budget. Maybe they've got $1,000 to spend. If you only have that, like if you can really only budget for that, your purchasing decision is going to be very different depending on what it is that fulfills your needs. If a Galaxy S20 and a $300 laptop dock can get your work done, I believe that's going to be a nicer overall purchase than like a $500 laptop and some other kind of phone that maybe isn't as nice as a Galaxy S20 in that, $300 to $400 range. Like when we're really putting these things together, I'm not much interested in a techie conversation that assumes a level of providence and wealth and privilege for owning everything. I know people in my circles of family and friends who would be better served on a Galaxy S10 or maybe like an LG V60. And that is their primary computing device. It is their main communications device. It's their main computer already because it's the first thing they reach for every single time they get an alert, a notification, an email, a text message, instant message, whatever. You're reaching for your phone first. So maybe you want that to be nicer. Maybe that's where you want to spend a little bit more of your money. And then for other things that they might need to follow up on, document work, email, where you really want a proper keyboard under your fingers, you can augment that experience. And you don't need to worry that maybe you don't have a full computer. Or it's I need to give my family laptop to the kids for school, but there's still things that I need to do and I can do them from my phone. And in that $200 to $350 accessories budget, I feel like that's a nicer solution than buying a cheap gut rot laptop. So I can't hold someone's hand. Oh no, Juan's saying I need to get rid of my laptop and I should, because that's not what I'm saying. You have to take my review of that at its worst possible interpretation. For those folks that can own a nice gaming laptop, great. Keep using the gaming laptop. But if we're not going to acknowledge that there's a huge spectrum of potential need out there, then we're really bad at tech. It's proper. You do not understand market trends. You are not looking for differences in the market, and you can't fathom people who have different needs and wants than what you immediately see in front of you. That's why we've got to blow this open. That's why I'm so antagonistic to the sort of insular echo chamber of tech. I don't really particularly care to have those people being celebrated on my videos and in my comments. We need to find a broader community of people using consumer electronics to talk to, because we're not getting it done in our little techie community. Paul Purry, I feel attacked for having 4 backup laptops. You should, Paul. Oh, and also thank you for all the subs. All right. Again, so much of this, if you want the nicer, friendlier version of this, I'd recommend checking out like Issa Does Tech. You're going to hear a very different perspective. You're going to hear someone who focuses on sort of the fashion and lifestyle of these brands. And you're also going to be talking to someone who acknowledges that in her family, someone's only compute device, literally their only proper computer, might be a mid-ranger phone. I'm more interested in looking up some of those trends out of more of the Asian island community, of the Indian community, and seeing like where can we learn some good lessons. Because right now someone's gonna struggle. It's gonna be a reach for them to pay $50 a month on a nice phone, but that's what they feel they need to own, with very little education out there that makes it to the end consumer. We're so worried about protecting these average consumers, but that person really needed a $350 Pixel or a $400 iPhone SE, right? But they're on the hook for $50 a month, and over the course of 2 years are going to be upside down in a phone lease. Well, if that's what they're doing, at least let's try and get them some more use out of that gadget and show them like, hey, with this $50 a month, you can displace the need for having some additional compute device, and it doesn't take much accessory-wise to get you there. Oh, and I definitely agree with this, Nick. I think part of the problem is that a lot of the discussion online is full of teenagers who have time on their hands, mom and dad to pay for their tech, haven't learned to not project their needs and wants onto everyone else. I get ranty and raily about this, and it's obviously an easy trigger for me. Like it sidetracks me very immediately, because when you step outside what YouTube spoon feeds you and what Facebook algorithms have done to this conversation, you see the huge conversation happening in the background. And that conversation is bigger. It is. But social media has front-loaded the louder, more profitable, divisive conversation. That's not real. None of this social media stuff is real. It's all manipulated and manicured to create this kind of outrage machine that supplies time on site, all at the expense of our mental health and well-being. And the deeper you get sucked into all of that, the worse and uglier and nastier it gets. But when you take a step outside of that insular conversation that's fostered by social media and reinforced by an echo chamber, you see some amazing, like, look at the Mojo community. They get no visibility, but you've got folks out there moving beyond just, well, I shot a couple of snippets of something on a phone and I incorporated that into a news piece. You see people like zero budget using old beat up iPhones to get like hard hitting news broadcasts done, documentary style, podcast style, all being done from mobile. All you have to do is take one step outside of the normal train of, I ran this benchmark and it got a bigger number style of reviews to see that there's a global community of people leaning on mobile compute power hard, and it might be their only compute power. And they're not being held back. In fact, there are strengths in mobile that are almost always neglected by more Western reviewers, and it drives me crazy because it leads to this lopsided conversation, and it means more and more people leave the tech scene, and we're not bringing new people into the fold. We're not finding newer techies to replenish our ranks. As many people are just like, well, nothing about what you're talking about resembles my lifestyle or my needs, so I'm out. Peace. Uh, And from the Suku One here in South Africa, very few people buy a phone on contract. Samsung A series, Huawei, and Xiaomi have a huge presence. Samsung A52, A72 are worth more discussion time than the S series in developing markets. They're worth more discussion here in the United States. Like, even in this first world country, a huge chunk of the population would do far better. I mean, that's why I said, like, most people's needs are really met somewhere around Pixel 4a. Like, it's nice if you can step up to 5G and some extra cameras, but the needs, you don't need to spend more than $400. And that's, I completely agree with you, and it definitely is this like huge blind spot in the tech commentary conversation. Paul is actually in the Discord has been talking about some of his journey on like how he used to flip Android phones on the regular, and like after a point you just want something that's going to be kind of like boring and predictable. The longer I own an expensive phone, the more I wonder why I own an expensive phone. Buys another expensive phone. Damn it. But the thing is, like, if you go out and buy an expensive phone, I want you to get expensive phone use out of it. um, you know, a nice phone displaces the need for a standalone camera, for maybe a microphone to have better broadcast over video calls or over streaming services, displaces the need to always run to a laptop for every single interaction that requires more than just a couple, key presses. Can displace the need for a standalone gaming system, depending on what kinds of games you like to play. I'm running Dead Cells really hard after the DLC came out, and it was so well optimized for Android mid-rangers. I mean, like, to know that a Pixel 5 is running Dead Cells at 90 frames per second, that is beautiful optimization from the developer. So this was a running theme. This was on the brain this whole last week, talking about optimization, talking about performance. So Sunday, this is a very brief write-up, but these are my early numbers for the OnePlus 9, because we're seeing some controversy on how some games seem to be throttled on the OnePlus 9 and OnePlus 9 Pro. Golden Reviewer, he's been doing a lot of game benchmarking using more granular performance metrics and performance tools. And he recently I think it was Fortnite. This one battle royale game only runs at 60 frames per second, and then it throttles, and so I'm selling my OnePlus 9. And you're like, okay, cool, but that's not the full story. So I ran some additional OnePlus 9 tests. I'm gonna have a video out soon-ish for me, talking about all of these different factors, because it's not one thing or the other. Performance testing on Android is in a really rough state. It's very difficult to examine all of the competing devices, compare them against each other, and arrive at an oranges to oranges comparison when hardware, software, manufacturer software, carrier software, and then developers making the games all have an impact on what the final play is for a video game on your phone. Adam, Tech Odyssey is checking out the ROG 5, and I think it's PUBG. I forget which one he said. Again, some of these stories are blurring together just because I've been digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this in a very obnoxiously obsessive kind of way. But I think it was PUBG. He said was capped at 30 frames per second. We know the ROG phone is going to be more powerful than that. So somewhere in there, there's a disconnect between ASUS's software, the hardware in the phone, and then the developer enabling a higher performance version of the game for this one phone. Same thing is happening with OnePlus. Same thing is happening with Samsung. Same thing is happening with Xiaomi. All of the premium tier chipset devices are in a hugely scattered state. So if you're doing like performance comparisons between a Galaxy and a OnePlus, you're not comparing oranges to oranges if you're using the out of the box settings. So if you're not enabling the higher performance tier on a Samsung, then your numbers aren't reflective of what it's like to also play the same kind of game on a OnePlus and vice versa. It's a mess. It's a proper mess. And we need to start treating phones more like Gamers Nexus or Hardware Unboxed. Like literally, phone by phone, app by app, to be able to account for how these things perform differently. And that's the only way to quantify this stuff. And it's maddening. Like, it's such a head trip trying to organize all of this data. Oh, and Nick Fell, exactly. It's PUBG's fault. I would imagine it's had a long-term history of poor performance on PC too. But this is also a trend where there seems to be app developer exclusives for things like high refresh rate modes. Because I believe Fortnite had a limited launch on which phones could support higher refresh. And PUBG, optimization issues, also very surprising. Not very surprising that they're kind of locking certain phones into certain categories. But this happens across the board. And so in my OnePlus 9 write-up, this is on the Patreon, by the way, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. As just an early sort of preview of what the video is going to be about. But, like I played Dead Cells, and out of the box, a Pixel 5 is delivering a higher frame rate than a OnePlus 9 Pro. Because software is messy, and that's on the manufacturer for what kind of high performance tier we're letting consumers have access to, which is also something that's difficult to quantify, but has a historical conversation in how these phones like to show benchmarks, make grand performance claims, but then they might not always live up to that when consumers get their hands on them. All right, moving right along. So yeah, that's on the Patreon, and it's my early data. But like I said, I will have a video out on it. But the patrons got the sneak preview. Like I mentioned, TK and I did our best of the week stream. We're talking about Xiaomi, Samsung versus OnePlus, and then also we talked about one of the topics we're going to cover today: LG still supporting updates. I also joined Tech Potato. I'm calling him Dr. Ian, so I like kind of making it like cool and groovy, Dr. Ian. But yeah, we had a chat about, what it might be like if you were considering picking up an LG phone. Maybe you get a really good deal on one. There could be some fire sales. So just sort of chatting about what the lay of the land looks like on LG devices and some of the older phones. Then I also joined Benefit of the Doubt, talking so long and thanks for all the fish. The L and the G in long were capitalized. And again, I got a little persnickety. I kind of feel like we drop a truism, like, oh well, LG was always terrible about this, and you're like, well, no, actually, from here and here, they were really good, and then people ignored them for this, and then Master of None, and blah 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 blah. So I always feel like whenever someone has me on to like talk about LG, it's like, well, we also have to correct historically for people that never used LG, just sort of vomiting out these truisms that weren't particularly accurate. And then I also had a conversation. This is a podcast that I just recently started listening to, and then the host of the podcast reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you want to come on?" So this is Brent on Tour, and they do a Java podcast, not Java the programming language, literally coffee. And asked me if I wanted to come on and talk coffee and LG. So it was just in the air. Like, hey, if you need to talk to someone about LG, regardless of what kind of podcast you run, There's this guy who wears these flat caps. The dude in the Kangles is probably the guy you should talk to. So that podcast should be out on Wednesday. If you ever wanted to hear sort of my philosophy of experience as it pertains to coffee, beer, wine, whiskey, there was some LG conversation in there too. But that was really fun. That was a nice way to kind of shake up last week. You know, like I got to do something different. Oh, you want me to talk about LG? Oh, you want me to talk about LG on a coffee podcast? Okay. All right, let's do that. Aditya, no, it absolutely was an entire podcast of, but I digress. uh, Gary the Fireman. We should just change the name of the podcast to Housekeeping with Juan. Yeah, that was a lot. Let's knock out the news. All of the stories, the articles, the other podcast appearances, the housekeeping, everything's going to be available on the show notes for this week's episode on SomeGadgetGuy.com. This is a very brief story. I mean, we're kicking off news, and I'm really going to try and rush through news here. We got way more that I want to talk about. And housekeeping ended up being kind of a preview on some of that. Back to screen share. This is an article from Gizmodo written up by Jody Serrano. Google used a secret program called Project Bernanke to benefit clients using its ad buying system. We need to keep an eye on this one. So this, there's the antitrust lawsuit that's being filed against Google in Texas, or I guess I should say it's led by the AG in Texas. In this, Google delivered discovery that was not properly redacted. I need that to sort of stand out just as its own point. Google dumped a bunch of internal memos, documents, and program details which weren't directly related to this antitrust lawsuit, not properly redacting the parts of it that weren't directly applicable. And now all of this is a matter of record for the lawsuit. I would imagine we're going to see some other type of legal follow-up based on the data that was disclosed in this here. Ironically, the company spilled the beans on its own secret program. The journal affirms that the court documents in question, which were reviewed by the outlet, although Google has since refiled them under seal, were filed by Google earlier this week in response to the Texas suit and were not properly redacted when uploaded to the court's public docket. Google acknowledged the existence of Project Bernanke in its response. And so basically, I mean, to grossly oversimplify, Google runs a service that helps publishers bid on advertising blocks for people who use Google's ad buying network. And they were able to wait and sort of rig that that auction service to their own benefit and to the benefit of the clients that were really utilizing Google services for buying ads on other websites. And so we're estimating that in 2013, this project to sort of manipulate the landscape of auctioning ads probably profited Google around $230 million that year. And I would imagine that some type of system has been utilized since 2013 to also, again, profit Google for how their clients utilize ad buying services. So now we need to see, like, I kind of feel that's worthy of some kind of regulatory action. It's worthy of some kind of regulatory investigation. If it's the FTC, what guidelines or disclosures needed to be made for what Google's auction service looked like, I would imagine that in a time where publishers are getting increasingly skeptical of social media, we're all super burnt out by Facebook style shenanigans, and we're getting those individual stories like, well, this local newspaper pulled their site off of Facebook and their readership and their monetizing went up higher. You're like, yeah, there seems to be a chilling effect for the actual companies creating this content when they rely too heavily on almost monopolistic platforms for distributing that content. So this one is definitely one we need to keep our eyes on. And it's also, to me, it's just, it had the lead this week just because it's hilarious. It's hilarious that Google just gave them the info. Like, you didn't need Project Bernanke. That was supposed to be scribbled out. But here you go. Oops. All right. In other sort of large corporate legal shenanigans, yet another, gotta keep an eye on it. I'm not really quite sure what the fallout from this will be, but Bloomberg has a short write-up on Apple and the App Store hearing. So Apple plans to skip App Store hearing, drawing ire from senators. This is written up by Anna Edgerton and Mark Gurman. Apple is refusing to participate. Apple is refusing to participate in an upcoming Senate hearing about the anti-competitive practices at online app stores, according to a letter addressed to Chief Executive Officer Tim Cook from Democrat Amy Klobuchar and Mike Lee, a Republican. The letter says the Cupertino, California-based company declined to send a witness for an upcoming hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee's antitrust panel to examine allegations of anti-competitive treatment of outside app developers. And this one's kind of interesting. If we remember that really long, it was like I had like a 4-hour stream looking at the C-SPAN feed of Amazon, Google, Apple, and someone else. Or was it just Amazon, Google, and Apple? I'm missing someone. Yeah, I can't remember. Dang it. Someone remind me. I really feel like there was someone else in there. It wasn't just Amazon, Google, and Apple and someone else. We thought it was funny that Microsoft wasn't in there. But Tim Cook was under oath, talking about, well, at the App Store, all developers are treated equally. And then was asked point blank about practices where certain developers could get exemptions based on certain metrics. And Facebook. Oh, how could I forget Facebook? Oh my God, my brain. Thank you, everybody. Aditya, was it Grinder? This week's podcast demonetized. No. So yes, and Facebook was the other biggie, the obvious biggie that I should not have forgotten. But yes, Tim Cook was under oath when he made those statements. And we got kind of the Animal Farm reply. Oh, all app developers are equal, but if some app developers can reach these kinds of metrics or have these types of business concerns, then those developers are more equal than other developers. He didn't say it that way. I'm obviously grossly satirizing what his actual comments were. But this is also an interesting follow-up to that initial hearing where now Apple is not sending someone to be interviewed by a Senate Judiciary Committee. So we know that this investigation is continuing and that at the federal level, we're looking at some type of investigation and potential action on how a major corporation like Apple, which has kind of a closed up ecosystem, it's a monopoly for iPhones, might be forced to do business in the future. We saw the Arizona state bill was probably shot down. Like, I don't think it's going to get up for a vote this year. If it is, it's probably going to be included on a vote in 2022. But that would have also forced some kind of wedge into how Apple does business with developers and how developers are allowed to monetize their apps. So this is a quote from the letter. So Klobuchar and Lee, the panel's chair and ranking Republican, noted that the vast majority of mobile apps downloaded from Apple and Alphabet Google platforms. Google has agreed to provide a witness for the hearing, but hasn't said who. Quote, Apple's power over the cost, distribution, and availability of mobile applications on the Apple devices used by millions of consumers raises serious competition issues that are of interest to the subcommittee, consumers, and app developers. So, a continuing and ongoing story. I feel like Apple is going to have to find some kind of pivot, or at least make some kind of concession in how monetization works on the App Store. Oh, from Braden, Apple will be sending someone to the hearing, though. The Verge got a story yesterday. Okay, well, hopefully, I'll look that up. I had my link from the Bloomberg report, which was, when was this published? It was published on the 9th. So maybe the pressure of that has spurred Apple to reconsider their stance on sending someone to the committee hearing. It it would not be a good look, in my opinion, if Apple sent nobody. And then you'd just have a bunch of senators getting to kind of like monologue during the hearing about the damages done by monopolistic business practices. All right, real quick. Logitech officially discontinues its line of Harmony Universal Remotes. This is, again, for sort of AV enthusiasts. This is kind of a sad day, as I feel like, again, just sort of the general market for smart TVs, smart players, like Fire TV, NVIDIA Shield, Chromecast, Apple TV, has kind of already cut into the sort of, I need a really nice remote that covers everything in my cabinet. But if you had a nice receiver with a good stereo and a TV, good speaker setup, multiple components, being able to switch easily between consoles and video streaming or video playing devices, it's sad that there was pretty much just a lock. I mean, you got those sort of cheap plastic, almost disposable universal remotes. Like you can go and pick up something at Target for $15. And then you had some nicer options if you wanted to try and tie everything into one global control stick. And to a varying degree, like our TV is now almost completely controlled by our Chromecast remotes. So, I mean, there's definitely an idea of still keeping that kind of thing in place. And like even our soundbar only really uses, I think it only uses IR, and even that we were able to map to the Chromecast remote. But it's a shame because the Harmony brand had also like maintained this catalog of compatible radio frequencies for the IR signal sending. It was kind of this easier way to have a nicer remote that would play nice with the vast majority of products out there. And it's just a shame, it's another one of those things, like as living room entertainment evolves, it was very likely that the need for multiple remotes and then a universal remote was going to dwindle. But it was also kind of carried out in, again, kind of in a monopolistic sense. Logitech bought up Harmony, and I think that was kind of like the two bigger players just sort of cannibalizing each other, and now they can just sort of pull the plug on it, leaving a number of people out in the lurch. Nick Fell, I worked at Target for a while. We sold those for $40 on a 100% markup. I believe it. Again, I feel like the manufacturing and the R&D that goes into a nice remote control, yeah, probably not a lot of investment being done there. So probably a lot of good profit, right next to your gold-plated HDMI cables and your fancy USB shielded cables. You're not making a lot of money on the actual, product, the actual like AV components and computers or printers. You're making a lot more money on just sort of the accessories that are right next to it. Like, because, we all need $100 HDMI cables, right? You want to buy one of those online, it might hack your mainframe. Walt Samarista, bring back IR blasters in phones. And definitely kudos to Xiaomi for continuing there. I, for the longest time, what was it? It was one of the LG Optimus. It was the LG Optimus G Pro. That was their bigger, the phabletier Optimus LG. That was just plugged in. We have these little end tables next to our couch, and they have power, so you can plug in USB cables or you can plug in chargers. And we just kept that Optimus plugged in basically all the time. And because like the battery was definitely running down. But that was our universal remote for the longest time. I mean, it did years of service as IR blaster, and we were using it as our main Chromecast interface before Chromecast was using a remote. So definitely some fond memories of using phones for that kind of those kinds of shenanigans. Gary the Fireman, gold equals better video. Well, yeah, I mean, you need it to be gold because you need like the least distortion in your signal transmission. So that's why you go with gold for your digital video connector. Oh, Nick Fell. I mean, again, I'm not saying that there's not something to be said for better shielding on a cable. Nick Fell says, I will say that the 30-foot shielded HDMI cable actually works versus the 30-foot unshielded one I had before. What I'm talking about is when we're spending hundreds of dollars on longer HDMI cables with fancy boots and colorful connectors and gold and all of that, that's snake oil. That makes zero difference to the connection. I mean, you're talking to an audio nerd, so I've got Mogami black and Mogami silver cabling. This is actually a custom cut cable on a Nutric connector. I mean, I get shielding, yeah, but you go to Monoprice and you spend what, like $1 a foot? You should be pretty good on just about any cable with decent shielding. Paul Purry, my monster cables get me at least $3 in class action rebates. All right, why don't we take a quick break here, talk about the subreddit, because we had a really heavy week on the subreddit too, and I'm really stoked. So from last week to this week, we properly crested 1,700 followers on the subreddit, and I missed by one person the registry of the Starship Enterprise. So at present, there are 1,702 people subscribed to reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. We had NCC 1702. Oh, I was so hoping to catch the screenshot of 1701, but alas, it was not to be. This was a great week. So topping out, John Darko, an audiophile salute to LG, sharing his experiences of using LG smartphones as premium audio solutions. Some frank talk. I mean, bringing up a very large YouTube reviewer influencer who also made a video about LG. And John pointed out, like, you didn't talk about audio at all. Here's this amazing breakdown of the history of LG phones. And he mentions quad DAC once on the G8 without even really talking about the audio quality. So here's this like major aspect of a consumer differentiating feature. And in this retrospect on LG, it goes completely ignored. So of course, his entire video is talking about being an audiophile and really liking premium audio and where to go now. Now that there are some better USB DACs, maybe the audiophile needs to go to USB. If we can't build it directly into the phone and you still want a portable player, you go to device or you go USB. So that was the #1 video on glowing rectangles this week. I watched it twice. Then my UPerfect X laptop dock review and my Pixel 5a, my Pixel 5 GPU performance update video. Those are coming in second and third place. We've got Painfully Honest Tech talking about LG and Team Vry talking about the Pixel 4a 5G rounding out the top 5. We've got Alt Dad Tech now climbing to 665 subscribers. He's building his YouTube channel, definitely growing. Android versus iPhone and privacy. We've got Mr. J. Williams checking out the Axon 7, 5 years of ownership. I need that to like really sink in. We talk about like, oh, I used that phone one time and it wasn't very good, so that brand is dead to me. And you're talking about a phone from like 8 years ago. The Axon 7 is still a baller, competitive, daily driver handling piece of hardware after 5 years. The amp on that phone is still killer after 5 years. I think we've caught up with speaker tech, but the speakers are still pretty good for the phone being 5 years old. I mean, the kind of the timelines and the comparisons and the what it is that we're trying to accomplish in talking about tech. It's crazy. It's crazy to see like, oh, these things have improved tremendously over 5 years, but like this other stuff is kind of the same. So then we've got the Friday Checkout. This is Tech Alter's secondary channel talking about Nokia and how this is probably dangerous territory for Nokia. We've got my Samsung versus OnePlus video. We've got Ryan Thomas talking about the fall of LG. Oh, I forgot to put this one in my housekeeping. I also make a guest appearance, a very brief guest appearance on their LG's What LG Did Wrong video. We've got Easy Computer Solutions looking at a OnePlus 9 Pro versus a Canon 90D. That's kind of fun. Oh, I need to upvote this. We've got El Jefe Reviews, top 3 true wireless earbuds for under $30 in 2021. Oh, sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to click away from that. Definitely give this a watch. Some great budget options are hitting the market. We've got an editorial talking about Moto's opportunity with LG out. Got a pair of videos from Mr. Tech Rant looking at the why he switched from a OnePlus 9 Pro, why he switched to a OnePlus 9 Pro from an iPhone, and another editorial kind of just talking about why tech reviewers will always make OnePlus lose in their comparisons. And we've got more follow-up videos on LG, on OnePlus. Josh Vergara with the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra video. We've got Brandon, this is Tech Today, looking at a Pixel Watch, Pocos. Jay Williams looking at LG, and the teaser video that we're going to be talking about for the Xperia 1 Mark III. Actually, I'm going to open that up in a side window here too. So this week on the subreddit was huge. 1,700 subscribers, tons of sort of broader alternative brand conversations, especially from a more Western perspective, seeing a lot of Xiaomi on the subreddit, seeing a lot of LG and Motorola and OnePlus conversations actually happening. It's really interesting to watch how there's like a hard trend on YouTube, and then you'll come over to reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles, and you're going to see a completely different collection of conversations and reviews and editorials than what like the main feed is going to be served up on YouTube. So again, every week I come to the subreddit and I look at the top stories, and it starts my Monday off on such a thrill that this is growing and it's resonating, and that there's an idea here of spreading the word on content that really does deserve more attention. So, Alt Dad. Aditya Nil saying we really are in a timeline where the name Juan Bagnell has become intrinsically tied with the LG mobile name. It's like that's what I get for being honest about what I like to use. From Ozeran 319, the audiophile take on LG was an excellent watch. I mean, again, totally different perspective, but outside the main techie echo chamber, and you saw very quickly there were different needs and wants and a completely different tone of conversation applied to something that this community cares about tremendously. From Groovy Beat, I remember I was between the OnePlus 3 and the Axon 7 at the time and didn't care about audio back then, but I remember everyone loved those speakers over the Nexus 6Ps. What's really sad is the OnePlus 3 through the OnePlus 5T. OnePlus, ZTE, and LG were actually in a really solid head-to-head for headphone audio quality. like if you compared an Axon 7, and I'm generally remembering things here, so I might have my facts a little off from when I was doing that testing years ago. But generally, your LG option was the best. You know, when you really looked at that V20, it was just unbelievable what LG had done with headphone audio. But the Axon had a louder amp, but the OnePlus amp back then was really good. I mean, it was a very close third place behind LG and ZTE. But then between the ZTE and the OnePlus, I believe the OnePlus had better quality. So, you know, again, it's similar listening levels, better signal to noise ratio, lower distortion, but had a quieter amp. So the ZTE could do a better job driving, you know, really, really thirsty, professional studio monitor headphones. But the OnePlus, depending on what you listened on, would maybe deliver a slightly higher quality output. I mean, that was such a fun time to have like this three-way conversation of different pros and cons and pieces and parts. And then with the OnePlus 6, we kind of lost it. It's really interesting to watch how those trends have kind of like tried to find toeholds, but then they don't advertise those as features, and then consumers don't care, right? Because they don't even know that they should care, and then they kind of give up and shrug, and it's just it kind of hurts your heart because there are so many of those. SD card expansion, IR blasters, removable batteries, you know, all of these things that have a tangible consumer benefit with very few compromises get taken away, but they were never advertised. Like they were never pushed by those individual brands as reasons why you might want to buy one phone over another. So why don't we get into some gadget talk here? Real quick, because we're gonna, you know, we've got a good 50 minutes here. I have to show this first because I'm not gonna get one. I'm not gonna spend my money on this. There's no way I'd get one as a review unit. That's not the kind of channel I run. But Optimus Prime and the voice of Optimus Prime is largely the reason I have any career in any industry at all. In fact, on that shelf back there is a little cubby full of some Optimus Primes, and in that cubby is the reel-to-reel, the actual audio tape demo of one Mr. Peter Cullen, who is the voice of the most iconic voice of Optimus Prime, the very first Optimus Prime, and the one that we think of most readily as the John Wayne style voice of Optimus Prime. So when I see something like this, a $700 fully transformable, and I mean like it's a robot. It's a robot that drives around as the original 1980s cartoon semi and can self-transform and walk like a little Honda Asimo. I want this so bad. It comes with like a little app where you can program Optimus Prime. He responds to voice commands. He's fully articulated. He can walk around. He can transform back into a semi all on his own. He can drive. I mean, like, if I could go back in time and show, you know, me as like a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, that this kind of thing would eventually exist. This looks like the most ridiculous science fiction to me, and it's totally legit. So I'm not going to play it here just because also, you know, I don't know with Hasbro whether or not I would get tagged with any kind of copyright for reshowing the video, but go and check the demo. Go and check that launch video showing this thing in action. It's insane. It's incredible. And it can be kind of like a programming platform for you to like actually work on something that's a proper robot. It's a walking robot. And I believe it also has a whole number of sampled voice replies from Peter Cullen. So Peter Cullen's voice samples are in the robot, you know, Autobots roll out, you know, that kind of stuff is I'm nerding out so hard on this, but it's $700 and I just can't. I want to so bad, but I can't. I really can't, but I want to. It looks so cool. From Dave Burns, that looks so much fun. How much is it? $700. Sorry. DT Nail just wrote, well, folks, we need to start a one-time GoFundMe for Juan. Let's get him that Optimus Prime. Please don't. Please put your money to anything more deserving. Okay. Anyone who would even jokingly consider setting up a GoFundMe and putting $1 behind this, instead, find a charity that means something to you. Find an organization that's doing good work to help people and make a $1 contribution in the name of Juan doesn't need an Optimus Prime robot. And that will mean so much more to me. That money will be put to so much better use than me having self-driving, self-transforming Optimus Prime. So, yes, that is the last thing I should probably say about Optimus Prime there. But it looks so cool. And again, it's just so incredible. Like, I've got the larger anniversary Optimus Prime up there, and he stands, I think he's 16 or 18 inches tall. And even that was an incredible, like, properly, fully articulated, individual fingers, joints, the chest opens and there's the matrix of leadership. And it transforms in a way that looks very much like, the cartoon transformation. It's just an amazing feat of engineering. To take that and then add all of the servos and motors to make it drivable and to make him walk just blows my mind. And it blows my mind that, I mean, really, when you think about that level of robotics at $700 is a lot for a toy. But, 10 years ago, we would have been looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars for a consumer facing robot that could walk and move around and drive and do all these things. It's just insane, like how much that has expanded. So, here, let me get this out of the way. Oh, Aditya, you're a good man, Juan. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm in a chat right now with a chat full of people that I know are good people. So anyone who else might be listening to this and might think that could be kind of funny to get Juan a robot, I'd much rather you not dedicate any money towards that endeavor. Another real brief story. This is why I start playing with leaks and rumors and getting kind of interested in what might be going down. And I'm immediately shown why we should just unplug from leaks and rumors. Like, it's not satisfying content. It's not good content. You're not getting much from it. And it kind of serves to spoil the announcements from brands that are looking to talk about their products or to try and generate some excitement. And then there's someone in the back of the room going, hey, but I can spoil that. It's not cool. So Google had to come out and say that the rumors of the Pixel 5a 5G being discontinued were incorrect. So a leaker said, hey, by the way, the Pixel 5a, I guess, is dead. And Google then had to spoil their launch to come out and say, Pixel 5a 5G is not canceled. It will be available later this year in the US and Japan. And announced in line with when last year's A-series phone was introduced. So there we go. Yeah, it's like, are we better for that? Are we happy about that? We got like an hour's worth of drama the morning this leaker said, oh, it's going to be discontinued and component shortages. And now, instead of just having the sort of regular announcement that Google would have put out, now they've like, okay, we're still going to make it. Cool. I don't know. Stuff like this is just really annoying for me because, we get to these keynotes, we get to these product reveals, these announcements, and like, they're getting so dull, but it's because like we're in this like amped up, super aggressive gotta nitpick every single piece of data that comes out. And that's kind of what passes for tech commentary these days. And it's not a lot of commentary. It's a lot of, whinging on about specs and leaks and bits and parts. And I don't know. I like playing the speculation game. I don't like the sort of cottage industry around trying to get the hardest click rates for getting people amped up about leaks. I don't know. It's tough to kind of quantify. I just don't think it's that much fun. I like, hey, what would you think? Because we're going to do that with the Xperia 1 Mark III. But I like actually making that, like a part of the conversation, not, oh, well, it's going to do this and then you're going to want that. So that's how it works. Because it doesn't work. From Paul, you jerk. I mean, it's not released yet, so the rumor is correct until it's released, LOL. Okay, that's fair. I'll give you that. The Pixel 5a does not exist until it exists. And the Sentinel 909, leaks are pointless. You are going to wait for a first look or review anyway. So leaks are basically just giving content creators material for vapid, pointless content. And it's all kind of built on this churn machine of popular keywords, search. Like, oh, there's a leak about the new Samsung. Oh, Samsung. Well, that's an important keyword. And now Google's going to rank my site higher. And that's kind of where we're at. Boing bite. Schrodinger's Pixel. All right, that was pretty good. I like that. Where do we want to go? You know what? Let's knock out LG because I kind of feel like this entire week has been really heavy LG. We got the official word. LG was pulling up their production. They're not going to be making smartphones anymore. There was we didn't know at the time. Last week, the announcement happened my Sunday night. And then last Monday's podcast, we just shared that news. We had a follow-up. We talked about it a little on Best of Our Week with me and TK. And there is now an official press release from LG that they're going to be supporting some phones for 3 years, for 3 years of updates, and some phones for 2 years of updates. And it seems premium tier phones released in 2019, G Series, V Series, Velvet, and Wing, are going to be in line for 3 operating system updates. And then certain 2020 models, such as the Stylo and K series, will receive 2 operating system updates. Now, this is LG, so I would always caution keeping your expectations in check. LG had actually started doing a better job of kind of leaning on bi-monthly as like your bug fixes, security patches. I feel like both that and the OS updates are going to slow down, especially over the second year of this commitment, of this promise. But they have mentioned specifically that certain regions, certain phones can expect extended support. I believe, it is my assertion, I have no insight from LG, gotten a lot of conversations with people in the LG consumer PR division, but again, no hard data coming from LG. This is just my guess. My guess is because of the relationships that LG had fostered with carriers over the last 2 years, you're probably going to find better software support for the carrier branded models because of their commitments and their contracts with carriers. Unfortunately, I believe, with no data to back this up, this is my guess, that the unlocked versions of LG phones will probably suffer longer update cycles because there's not going to be any pressure from a carrier relationship to continue and improve and iterate on that software. So that's my feeling. That's where I think we're going to be at. Now, a Korean version of the LG website spelled this out more explicitly. And so this is Talk Android. It was one of the first outlets that I found that was mentioning this specifically. And so they have a list of The Velvet is going to be getting an April rollout. G8X, Velvet 4G, G8S, Wing, K52, K42, the V50s, the V50 and the V50S, and then all the Q series phones. It's unknown when the rollout for Android 11 should arrive, but the other ones are listed specifically. So G8X, third quarter 2021 for Android 11. LG Wing, fourth quarter for 2021. Android 11, they're the Korean version of the LG website is confirming all of this. The Korean version of the website, though, also made mention of Android 12 and Android 13 updates, and the Wing, the Velvet, and the Velvet LTE are going to be supported through Android 13. The V50, V50S, G8, and LG Qs are going to be supported through Android 12. Now, as you might have noticed, there is no V60 on that list. So this is one of the things that's always going to be problematic about LG and their messaging. This is the LG Korean website. We have no idea what the relationship will be with United States carriers and the North American market and support for the V60 in North America. So what we need to see is an actual English-facing regional version of that LG website to properly anticipate whether or not the V60 is going to be bumped off of the support train for Android 12 and Android 13. So it's still an unknown. And that's always been one of the critical failings of LG and their corporate messaging is they'll detail something like this and then leave out data that a lot of people are going to care about. And then we just don't know. So we'll be keeping an eye on that too. But, you know, maybe my Wing is going to be a test platform for Android 13 using mid-ranger hardware from 2020. We have no idea. Dave Burns, I actually have not been able to find a good answer to that question. Dave is asking, did they not sell a V60 in Korea? So there are permutations of V60 for an international model for T-Mobile and for Verizon. So like a V600 TM is a North American variant of the V60 for T-Mobile. And I believe the VM600 is the Verizon model, which was also a UW capable phone. I don't know what model designation for V60 would have been used in South Korea. I genuinely, from like, you know, like a good half hour of Googling around all of the various model numbers for V60s, I couldn't find it. So I don't know what model of phone was sold, and it's potentially likely that the V60 was more of an international play. The weird thing about LG is they always looked at the G series as their mainstream international phone. And the V series was really a niche product that didn't have the full support of LG internally. It was kind of their premium focus play for a number of regions like the United States when it launched, you know, in the EU and the UK. But LG International or LG Global really thought G series was their bread and butter, mainstream, everyone around the world premium phone tier. So again, you saw like, you know, how big of a push the G5 got, and like they dumped so much money into branding and marketing with Jason Statham doing ridiculous commercials for it. The V20 didn't get that same kind of global marketing push. So again, internally, they were even looking at specific regions going, well, the V series, that's an American phone. It's too big and it's kind of cumbersome and it's got all this extra stuff on it. That's the phone that the Americans are going to care about. It's so weird. It's so strange to see, you know, like how those internal decisions are arrived at. So I don't know. The long and short of it is I'm not sure if V60 did get the same kind of proper launch as Velvet and Wing did in South Korea. Aditya Nil, I need to go undercover on Korea's LG forums as some sneaky sneak guy. Oh, Walt Samarista is saying there is no V60 in Korea. Oh, and Steve Q3 Becker, the MediaTek Velvet. I would imagine that any update that the update that the Velvet gets, the MediaTek flavor of that is going to be way behind, if not completely ignored. But there will probably be some security patching for it just because that was a T-Mobile exclusive variant. So I'm sure LG has some kind of contract or obligation with T-Mobile on some tier of support. But I would not expect nearly as much attention for the MediaTek Velvet as the Qualcomm Velvet. This stuff gets messy, and it gets messy because LG was playing so regionally with all of their different products. That's really interesting. Again, if there was no South Korean flavor of the V60, that would make sense as to why a South Korean website wouldn't publish expected Android 13 updates for a V60. Okay. There's a lot I've been talking about LG and saying about LG, so I feel like we can kind of move on, because I'm still on the hunt. I am really enjoying my time with the OnePlus 9, but there are a few things that I just would take for granted on LG phones being able to get my work done. And I have to believe that over the next year, I'm probably going to be more mobile and more traveling a little bit more than I was the year before. So I'm properly trying to figure out, like, where do I go next? And increasingly, as I play with, like my Xperia 1 Mark II, and I kind of compare that against my V60. I was using the V60 really heavy to show off like that laptop dock review, the UPerfect X. I'm kind of leaning towards whatever Xperia follow-up might be my replacement for a work-focused content creator kind of handset. So when we're checking these boxes, the ability to use USB or headphone jack audio to plug in mics, I can do that on an Xperia. The ability to capture content, shoot a little more cinematically, have more control over the video quality, the video settings. I like what Sony is doing. I'm going to miss focus peaking, but the rest of the app is really well fleshed out. And then just like my shooting style, both Sony and LG, I think they get hammered for photography that looks a little more muted. It's a little more camera-like, but the actual quality of those images I prefer. And then if I want to juice them up or throw on a filter, I think it's a better base to start from than just, out of the box, it's going to shoot, obnoxiously hyper bright and oversaturated images. So I'm guessing, because we don't have the final word. We don't know, exactly there have been lots of leaks and rumors on the Xperia 1 Mark III, but coming out, I feel like this is looking like the kind of product that might fit my workflow better if I'm looking at what new phone I'm really going to lean on for 2021. I feel like all devices starting this year off, I should say, starting with the iPhone 12s and moving into the next generation Qualcomm chipsets, the story and the issues that we're going to face are increasingly maximizing mobility power, but often at the expense of battery life and consistent performance. And it takes a lot to manage. It takes a lot to kind of balance that out. And there are some companies, like, I don't think Samsung is doing a very good job of this. For a premium tier device, I feel their solution is more throttling and hamstringing, kind of crippling the phone out of the box. And then you never have to worry about slowdowns because the phone is never really operating at the tier that it's capable of, unless you go digging through settings. So you have to be of two minds. Do consumers dig through settings? OnePlus, I find, has been handling the higher tier performance concerns, especially for like gaming. I feel they've been handling it better than Samsung. It's interesting. I think it's kind of it's a closer battle and a more even fight between Samsung and between OnePlus and Xiaomi. But I think OnePlus is doing a better job than Samsung is at present. If there's any other company that I think can address a hot chipset, manage the performance, and find ways of sort of tailoring the performance to a more professional application, I think it's Sony. Um, the sad part is like I really hope Sony will add things like the HS power control for their own camera app. You know, that to me would be a really nice perk. It kind of bothers me on the Xperia 1 Mark II when I go to turn on HS power control. It's app by app, and Sony's own system apps you can't whitelist for HS power control. And it's like I'd love to be able to plug an Xperia 1 Mark II into a power source for when I need to shoot longer out in the field, but then not run the camera even hotter by having the phone charging while I'm doing that. You know, those kinds of things like that would be really nice. But what are we feeling? I mean, like from seeing the leaks and the rumors out there, and I don't have one. And this isn't me like kind of teasing it. Like on the day I'm gonna drop this hot video, I don't have an Xperia 1 Mark III. There is gonna be no launch video from me on the day of the announcement. That's not a surprise I can give you guys. I'm not like cagely. So what do you think is gonna be on the Xperia? Like we're all playing that game. I'm waiting for the final reveal, and I'm waiting for the final announcement, just like everybody else. Oh yeah, and Nick Fell. I wish I could bypass the battery at any percent over 90% system wide. That would be huge. I really want that on all phones. F Mooney. The great thing about the S21 is that it just works. Apart from when you have to go into the settings to just works it. Oh, from Dank Pikmin God, just give me an Xperia. Just give me an Xperia with T-Mobile bands. Well, I mean, I feel like it's pretty safe. Like I'm pretty sure an Xperia 1 Mark III is going to have a top of the line Qualcomm chipset, which means the radio and management hardware should be better than what we had on the 865. Better carrier aggregation, better support for international bands. We saw with the Xperia Pro. They did really good work with antenna arrays and management for millimeter wave. And so one of the unexpected huge perks of the Xperia Pro was much more considered thermal hardware, cooling hardware inside that phone. And it would be really cool if some flavor of that made its way into an Xperia 1 Mark III. So, I mean, that kind of stuff would be nice. You know, that'd be a tangible perk because it's in that. It's like using the OnePlus 9. I get a feeling of it's harder to build a phone around this chipset. I'm not completely out of. I got to take a step back. So Galaxy S21 comes out and I review it, and I don't even really review it. I'm just kind of playing with it. I'm testing it, and the performance is troubling. Like the way this phone throttles kicks you back almost 2 generations. Like there are a number of applications where an S10 can still very much hang with an S21. So now I'm my initial reaction is very concerned. Is this another Snapdragon 810? Is this another major problem from Qualcomm with the power of this SoC? So I get my hands on the OnePlus 9 and OnePlus 9 Pro, and initially my concerns with Qualcomm kicked out the window. Everything that I test the S21 for, the OnePlus 9s handle far better. It just more consistent, better mannered, just maintaining a higher tier of gaming, of content creation, of photo editing, and the phones, they run hot, but they're not throttling and they're not tanking performance as inconsistently as the Galaxies are. Well, after that, a few other people testing on a few other games that I don't play, looking at a couple services that I'm not playing with, and then some sporadic concerns about overheating, especially when you're running the cameras really hard. My concern on the Snapdragon 888 is kind of returning to Qualcomm delivering something that's really more of a tablet processor that we're trying to shove into a smaller gadget. All of this performance, all of this horsepower, it kind of feels like it needs just a bit more surface area and a bit more consideration for building the whole product around this SoC. So I believe OnePlus has done a better job of building the phone around the 888. For a mainstream brand, not a gaming phone, like if you can add active cooling, well, that introduces other compromises, but you're focused on a certain kind of performance. So you can make that choice if it's a Red Magic, or you just build a chunkier frame like an ROG or a Black Shark. Totally get it. But for something that's more photography, video, and mainstream focused, Sony is a mainstream premium tier consumer brand. I kind of believe going from Samsung to OnePlus, OnePlus has a reputation for performance. I think they've done it better than Samsung. For consistency, like I don't think an Xperia is going to outperform the OnePlus, but I think it's going to maintain more consistent performance than a OnePlus. That's what I'm hoping to see. So this is the ongoing evolution of the conversation around this SoC. It's every phone that comes out sort of adds another chapter to this story, and we're going to get to the end of the year before we make a final determination as to whether or not Qualcomm delivered another dog of a chipset, or did manufacturers at the beginning of the year just cheap out and not build the phone properly to handle what this SoC is capable of. So that's a really nuanced and difficult conversation to follow over the course of the year. And I say this, I started this whole thing out saying like this did actually properly start with the iPhones. The A14 does not run as consistently well as the A13. So even Apple is not immune to this. We're making a really big, hot premium tier chipset. Even iPhones fall prey to this kind of power creep, not being properly cooled, not delivering the batteries that you need to deliver that kind of consistent performance, having to manage more throttling over time, and definitely for graphics, we can see numerous testing. We can see how the A14 might spike better. Like you might be able to hit a higher frame rate, but you cannot keep as consistent a frame rate on an iPhone 12. So it's precious stuff because we want to feel like, hey, you're going to spend a lot of money on one of these things. Are you really going to get more phone? And now, we've got an entire culture of tech reviewing that does not examine the nuance of those kinds of differences. I'm going through gaming testing, and there are a couple other folks who do any kind of, sort of limited game benchmarking. Like I mentioned, Golden Reviewer, like one of the few I can think of that really does show like the performance tracking and the thermal tracking and the power draw that comes from these types of products. That's where I first saw like, oh man, this GPU is hitting almost 9 watts. The power that your phone is consuming is now hitting like low-level laptop use. And you do not have laptop surface area or a laptop-sized battery to compensate for that. I believe following their math, Golden Reviewer said something like, if you really could run the GPU without it thermal throttling, you could evaporate the battery on a Mi 11 in under 2 hours. And, like I was trying to do that, check out that kind of performance on the Galaxy S21. And yeah, the math on that kind of fits. It would have been well under 2 hours if you could keep the GPU at its peak power draw. But of course, the phone would melt before you could do that. So Gary the Fireman, maybe with Android 15, we'll get battery bypass built in. It would be really helpful if we could take some of the load off of a battery when we know we're going to be using that phone in a more, sort of sedentary, sort of a sit down, use it, plug it in. It would be nice if we could take stress off of the battery for that. I got to catch up on the chat here. Hold on one second. Oh, and Heiki is just saying it was nice to see you again. Sorry for being so late, but I had online teaching at the same time. Well, thank you for joining. Thank you for catching the podcast, buddy. Ooh, Walt Samarista is saying that Xiaomi has a manual video mode for all camera sensors, so that could be a good alternative. I really do want to play with the Ultra. I've got to finish the Oneplus 9s. Then I need to backtrack on some other accessories and some audio gear, and then I'll be looking at what phone to try and cover next. I'm really hoping that Sony can announce the Xperia and detail a reasonable timeline for that phone shipping, because that's also been one of the problems for some of these smaller players. LG used to be the king of this. Like, we'll announce the phone at MWC, and we don't know when you can buy it. Bye! And Sony, unfortunately, especially with all the component shortages that are hitting right now, I think Sony also kind of got caught up in that too, where like they announced the Xperia 5 Mark II, and then it kind of wasn't shipping until like right on top of the holidays. Like it took a couple months before the phone was actually like available for someone to physically buy. And unfortunately, I kind of feel like a number of players, especially at Sony's size, for the numbers that they're going to sell, I hope that they've got a strategy where they can announce pre-order is going to go live a month later, and then the phone's going to be in your hands. But I don't believe that will be the case. Like they might announce it, and then it might take 2 months before you can really get your hands on one. So I'm not sure where to kind of fit in or what other phone to check out in the interim. But it's taking like longer and longer to just make it through my OnePlus videos, because so much data needs to be built to really look at what's going on with all these claims. And again, there's so much editorializing that it distracts from the conversation on what these things can really do. Like someone shared it on the Discord. Hold on, I'm gonna pull up the Discord real quick. And someone shared, was it you, David? Did you share that? You were talking about being kind of a masochist. Yeah, so David owns a OnePlus 9 Pro, so I think he took this one a little seriously. I mean, a little personally, excuse me. And again, we're looking like LG is out of the market. They're not going to be making any new phones. So tech reviewers need to find another whipping boy company. And it's my money's on OnePlus. OnePlus is now going to lose every single battle, every single showdown, every single comparison. They're never going to be good enough. You're never allowed to charge as much on a OnePlus as you might on an iPhone, even if they're, different features, different capabilities, different camera sensors. What you get for $1,000 on a OnePlus is very different than what you get for $1,000 on an iPhone. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because they're the same price. And the iPhone is always going to win. The Samsung is always going to win. There's nothing OnePlus can do to make a competitive product that will be acknowledged as a competitive product. It will always be the implied loser in a comparison that no one asked for. So Dave shared this, and I'm not going to actually click on the article because I'm really not trying to give it any traffic. OnePlus 9 Pro owners complain of crippling overheating issues. And then he quoted from the article, OnePlus promises a lot with the OnePlus 9 Pro, not least that it would offer exceptional camera performance. Early reviews have confirmed that this was more marketing speak on OnePlus's behalf than anything else, with the OnePlus 9 Pro unable to compete with similarly priced Apple, Samsung, or Xiaomi flagships. Worse still for OnePlus, it has shipped some OnePlus 9 Pro handsets that overheat when recording 4K videos or even after taking a half dozen photos. This is an article about OnePlus overheating, and the editor of this article could not help but editorialize on early, which we know are garbage, early camera reviews not being competitive against similarly priced Samsung and Apple products. That is not a part of the conversation on overheating. Where does that come from? Well, no. We say anything about OnePlus, we need to make sure that Apple and Samsung owners, well, they feel good about their purchases and they feel that they were right to not consider that OnePlus purchase. That's the audience that line is targeted at. You only include that kind of line when you really want to make sure that the cooler kids table, they all get a pat on the back for being a part of the cooler kids table. Same thing happened with the Pixel 5 and the Verge. In the middle of an S21 Ultra review talking about the camera performance, we're going to compare the S21 Ultra against the iPhone 12 Pro Max. We're not even going to bother with the Pixel 5. Why bring it up? It's a Samsung review. You don't need to bring up the Pixel and how you're not going to include it in a camera comparison in the middle of the Galaxy S21 Ultra review unless you're really just going out of your way to make Samsung owners feel good about themselves. Like, you don't go off on those tangents. You don't go off. That's not a part of like the actual review process. You don't make a comparison out of a commentary like that unless you're really trying to satisfy a very specific audience's wants. They want to feel good about what it is that they own. And I get that. You're going to make way more money telling Samsung owners that they're right to own Samsung. But this kind of editorial, it's not even competitive against a similarly priced iPhone. And I really want that phrase to kind of stick in your brain. A OnePlus 9 Pro is $60 more than an iPhone 12 Pro. Not a 12 Pro Max, an iPhone 12 Pro. The image sensor on the ultra wide of the OnePlus 9 Pro is larger than the main camera sensor on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. You have to be terrible at photography on a OnePlus to not arrive at competitive images between a 9 Pro and an iPhone 12 Pro. I mean, you have to be proper bad at pointing a camera at something to not see competition. Now, you might prefer, your personal bias might extend to liking iPhone color science and post-processing better. But to try and claim that they're not competitive is grotesquely wrong. I mean, just like you are objectively incorrect that they are not competing against each other with various pros and cons and in ways that might appeal to some people over other people. That's what competition means. So in my LG review, when I said it's not enough that we get good competition, if techies can't acknowledge when something really is competitive, smartphone market is dead. And the smartphone commentary market is nothing but amplifying the marketing and hype from the companies that generate the most income. So, you know, you've got Samsung with a $10 billion marketing machine. They're always going to win. They're always going to win because you're going to make more money by making sure Samsung wins. It's game over. There is no nuance. There is no debate. It's been decided for us thanks to Facebook and YouTube style algorithms. And from Heiki, I completely agree. I feel that it's because of Google traffic. People find articles in a manner, product versus X product, and if there is a word of an unwanted product, it's going to generate more traffic. It's cheap, dishonest, and short-sighted. I'm sorry, I'm catching up on comments here. And See, Nick fell. Wait, when did Xiaomi get lumped in with Sam Apple? Is the CCP watching over this guy's shoulder through some family tree of parent companies leading to Tencent? Um, so Xiaomi is becoming one of the sweetheart brands. OnePlus betrayed techies. I mean, think about the language that we use. It's not OnePlus's business is evolving because you can't keep catering to enthusiasts and survive. OnePlus isn't evolving into a broader consumer company. OnePlus is betraying the enthusiasts that used to support them. So now, and I just played with the Mi 11 Lite. That is a stinking good mid-ranger. And Xiaomi is going to compete hard on a very disruptive price performance kind of conversation. But you need to kind of like lift up another company, and then eventually they'll get too big for their britches and they'll get trashed too. But right now, the SEO, I'm sure, the SEO on Xiaomi is hotter than OnePlus. So how do you want to phrase this to make it seem like you're really being broadly consistent and fair? You bring up, oh, well, Samsung and Apple. Oh, but if I stop there, then people will know I'm really just, really just pointing this at the popularity. What's the next biggest company? Xiaomi. All the numbers are showing that the sales numbers are improving, that they're going to overtake Huawei, or I think they did overtake Huawei as like a strong number 3. Okay, so now it's Sam Apple and Xiaomi, and all of those are definitely going to be better than that OnePlus. Thank you very much. It's literally the ranking. Like look at how the sales are falling between like BBK brands, Xiaomi brands, Samsung, Apple, and you can literally just rank. Before you even watch the conclusion of a video or read the conclusion of an editorial, go look at the market share. Go look at how like the search trends are playing out. And I bet with scary accuracy, you'll be able to predict which phones win in comparative showdowns. I mean, it's that obvious. The game is being played that directly. Like we're saying all the quiet parts out loud now. And it's less fun when it's that obvious. Just saying. So, Gormlord, that's a nice sentiment, but it definitely doesn't play out. Gorm writes, anyone smart about learning about new phone tech will eventually end up on channels like yours. The others will stick to channels that tell them what they want to hear. The part of the problem is, because this isn't a meritocracy, this isn't, I make a video, people find that video, subscribe to my channel, and are more likely to find more of my videos. YouTube actively gets in between the content creator and the audience. And their algorithm makes a play at, you made a video talking about how to improve your video editing on a phone. That's not going to be very popular. So we're just not going to send it out to people. So that video languishes. I think my holiday, how did I phrase it? How to edit video for your holiday family videos or something. Too many using the words video. I put a lot of work into that. Like, I think that's a pretty good starter topic for how to make better family memories. That video died on YouTube around the holidays, holiday topics, trying to get people to get more use out of a phone. I'm showing some pretty cool stuff. Dead. And when I bring it up, like, a lot of people who are subscribed and have smashed that bell icon don't know that video exists. So that's the truth of, finding a channel like mine means very little to YouTube. YouTube is not putting my video in the feed of people who have subscribed to my channel. And that seems pretty clear. Again, I can't know exactly how any of that works because there's no accounting. Like, there's no after action, there's no reporting. It's all on me. Your last video wasn't as popular. We've got little down arrows in all of your metrics. You've got to do better. You've got to make better videos that people will want to watch. But then I also know for a fact that that video with all the little down arrows wasn't seen by any of the people that have subscribed. So it's a big mess. It's a very big problem if we're going to improve the quality of our tech reviewing. It's very frustrating. Oh, and Dave Burns is talking about time on site is the most important metric, and Juan's videos encourage people to learn and think and leave YouTube and use their phones. And Google hates it. They hate me. This one trick, Google hates this one trick from this one content creator in a flat cap. um, from Chris 2904, rumors say Pixel 6 will have Samsung image sensors, and with custom CPU, it can be a win if it's less than 1K. What do you think? Samsung image sensors are great. The problem is almost always on software. So, what is it? I forget exactly. It's the GW1. The 64 megapixel shooter on the V60 is a Samsung sensor. How you create a camera app around that sensor determines more, in my opinion, than just what the actual slab of hardware might represent. Because we've seen that sensor on some like $300 or $400 phones, and the output is not as good as what I can do on my V60. So that experience and that expertise in post processing and in video content, it matters a lot. So who do we know who's really good at computational photography? Because I still feel like for the vast majority of point and shoot style consumer experiences, Pixel is the top dog for still photos. I mean, like the ease of use, the streamlined camera app, the simplicity, getting into the app, getting the shot that you want, and sharing it to social media. I really don't think anyone has bested the Pixel. In fact, I think Apple has taken some steps away from it in making their camera app more complicated and more difficult to navigate. So, if Google is starting to build the data to properly process photos on larger camera sensors, pixel binning camera sensors, quad Bayer filters, whatever it is that they're going to use, then Pixel 6 could be a really big deal for photography. A larger sensor comes with some drawbacks. It comes with some issues in lens design. It comes with much more expensive stabilization concerns. But again, the computational photography output from Google has been so good and so strong and so consistent that giving them a larger sensor to work with should be a lot of fun. I really hope we can deliver a fair assessment on a Pixel 6 where it's actual price to performance. If they go with their own SoC, we're going to see different tiers of performance and different benchmarks. But Pixels don't get fair consideration there. You know, a Pixel 4 XL will lose most of the synthetic benchmarks against phones of that era. It's going to lose all of the synthetic benchmarks against the phones that came out the year after. So anything on a Snapdragon 865 is going to benchmark better than a Pixel 4 XL. But if you really use the phone and you use it for photos and videos, there are no devices that outperform the image computing hardware of a Pixel 4 XL. That little coprocessor that Google put in there does not influence synthetic benchmarks, but you arrive at a monster performer for chewing up video data. I mean, it's just insane. It's far and away a more powerful device than anything near it, you know, in most of the phones that came out a year after. And that's what's going to happen to the Pixel 6. I ran a Geekbench and the score wasn't as good. It couldn't be worth 1,000. You're going to get like 4 or 5 years of software support. You're going to get custom image processing hardware. You're going to get Titan security, you know, like you're going to get all this stuff. No, it's not worth it because the Geekbench score is lower. Do you mean you need the Geekbench score? Because I do all my work at a Geekbench. It can't be worth it for the money. It's too expensive. Google can't charge more. And that's what's fundamentally wrong with techies. That is a purely juvenile emotional response. Has nothing to do with the data. Has nothing to do with the real world performance. And no one is testing for that. I should not be the only reviewer running real world apps for my testing, for my benchmarks. I have asked in numerous videos and in numerous episodes of this podcast, is there anyone else who is timing the completion of a task consistently in real world apps? And the fact that there is no one who is doing that in Android land is a Greek tragedy. It's a travesty. I ran Geekbench 5 times in a row to see how performance would degrade. Useless. Thank you for wasting everyone's time. That is not a beneficial use of a product. Tells you nothing about how that phone will run a specific app in any kind of real world conditions. So I am happy to pay a little bit more for a Pixel 5, considering the mid-ranger SoC, knowing that Google is going to be way more consistent about software updates, patches, improving features, adding new features, than a phone that costs the same but has a more powerful SoC. That is a fair comparison for a consumer. Do you want a little bit more horsepower but then fall off the train, the bandwagon for timely updates? Or do you just always want to be at the cutting edge of Android and you're fine to sacrifice a little CPU power? That's easy. You could just say that, but we can't. Techies are incapable of drawing that kind of a comparison. They're all excited that Samsung is promising more software, but that was always a perk on a Pixel. It was regularly a pretty decent benefit on a Oneplus. Why does it matter now? It matters now because they'll make more money talking about it for a Samsung than they ever did talking about it for a Pixel or for a OnePlus. And again, the game is not fun when it's this obvious. So if a Pixel comes out at $999, it will be too expensive. The cameras are already outclassed. Computational photography can't take us far enough. The Geekbench scores are concerning. This is a new unproven SoC. Maybe wait for generation 2. Blah, 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 blah. You might get a few people. Well, I mean, like if you're really into Pixel, you want to support that. Maybe that's the right fit for you. But I think average consumers who aren't spending $1,000 on a phone, well, they need to look elsewhere. And that's what the tone of the conversation is going to be. And I really hope I'm wrong. But unless Google scores some massive SEO victories with consumers on the ground, then the reviews will be judged by how much viewership those videos get, not how the device actually performs. Nick Fell. The same people who run Geekbench don't think there's any productivity tasks on a phone beyond email. Is there anyone monitoring frame rates over time in popular games? I feel that would be the most likely real world benchmarks to be out there. So there are a few gaming benchers. Like you'll see that with the gaming phones. Like they actually take gaming phones seriously. And I brought up Golden Reviewer as one example of someone who's doing far more consistent, granular performance testing for gaming. But the same thing, I want to see this for any other app. Lots of people edit photos on their phones. More and more people are starting to edit video on their phones. You can't have the rise of a service like TikTok without some consideration for crafting video content from your mobile and not always having access to a proper workstation to cut up the video exactly the way that you might want to. You're doing the edit through cuts, through pausing a video and resetting a shot and then restarting the video. You're having to get really creative to make that piece of media. That all has to happen on the phone. Like that's all right there. So, outside of just gaming, there is a broad variety of performance that we should be looking at. I like to look at things that run a little bit longer, things like file compression, video rendering, batch photo processing. That kind of stuff to me seems to help illustrate the differences in both peak performance and sustained performance. But that's it. I'm the only one, and that's not enough data. We need other people doing similar tests like this to compare and contrast different results. Like that's where the conversation really needs to live. It's like Gamers Nexus and Hardware Unboxed might come to different conclusions based on their test setups. And that's where a consumer can make a more targeted purchase for their actual needs. Oh, hey, apparently TK Pay dropped by. What's up, buddy? We're going to be wrapping this up here. I'm almost out of water, and we're right at 2 hours now. So, ooh, Doomer benchmark idea. Minecraft Java edition on phones via POJav launcher app. That thing is a way to measure how good settings each phone can run full on Minecraft Java edition for PCs. I'm just not super into Minecraft. Again, I'm telling you about the games I actually like to play. Right now I'm jamming hard on Dead Cells. I really like I've been revisiting Titan Quest. The legendary edition of Titan Quest for Android is really well done. I've kind of chilled on Anima ARPG because their most recent update broke a whole bunch of character stats, and they killed my so it's kind of like Path of Exile, where you can play the game for free and it's totally playable for free, but if you want like extra stash pages so you can keep more of an inventory, you kick them a couple bucks. And I really enjoyed the game, so I kicked them. I think it was $3.99 for their combo package with starter weapons and extra stash pages, and like you get like some character armor aesthetic stuff. It doesn't improve the capabilities of your character. It's just aesthetic. So this new update broke my stash pages, and like I paid for those, and I even wrote the developer, got no reply, left a 1-star review, and they're like, well, but how did you buy the stash pages? And you're like, doesn't matter. I can't access the stash pages. It doesn't matter how I bought them. I gave you money to unlock this feature in your game, and it's still broken. So I've chilled on Anima. But like Battle Chasers, I'm kind of going back and revisiting games like Sentinel, just because it's such a good tower defense game. But Unruly Heroes is flippin' phenomenal. If you like, sort of Dead Cells or Metroidvania platforming, Unruly Heroes is a great multi-character platformer action game that plays really well. Again, I mean, we're getting these Nintendo Switch ports, and I'm starting to feel like the Android version of these Switch ports are actually better versions than playing it on the Nintendo Switch. So yeah, some really solid stuff if you can kind of go digging for some of these gems. Crying Suns. I mean, just again, I've already gotten sidetracked, like Dave Burns was saying. You should sidetrack me. But yeah, it's really good times when you can kind of dig into gaming more than just, well, this is the one game that seems to be the most populars. So instead, I'm going to try and talk about the games that I really do like to play. Dave Burns, Nintendo Switch is just an underpowered Tegra, so it's basically an Android phone. Considering you can get better screens, and there are some games that handle controllers really well. Like I love playing with my little Steel series connected to an Android phone. Yeah, I would not discount that Android is kind of a distant last platform. When a game has sort of exhausted its other opportunities throughout, throughout the other platforms, it can arrive on Android as a very solid way to get the game for cheap and then also play it anywhere. Like Stardew Valley. The Android port for Stardew Valley started a little shaky, but I mean, it's been polished up and it's a great representation of that game, ready to be played on mobile. And you were able to buy it way cheaper than you could on any other platform, and you got it for free on a Chromebook. Like, to discount how good Android gaming has gotten is really silly. So now I just want to extend that conversation, talking about gaming performance, to other areas too, where someone might want to create content on mobile. Someone might want to write documents on mobile. Someone might want a podcast on mobile. And I'm starting to argue, like, the experience of walking into an interview, clipping a mic to someone's shirt, pushing record on my phone, talking for a couple hours, grabbing that audio, and I'm done is better than using a handy recorder. It's better than using a laptop and mics connected to it. Like, that is so much more accessible and so much more discreet than how we used to record audio on the go. So, on that note, let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. Folks, thank you for joining me on this journey. This is going to be a really funky year for mobile, and I am pendulum swinging back and forth between impressed and concerned, and impressed and then concerned, and then finding some good stuff and then finding some problems. So I don't think we'll really be able to recap this year during this year. Like, we're at the start of conversations that the ramifications of this hardware probably won't be fully felt, especially by consumers, until like into year 2 and year 3 of owning these devices. And sadly, our tech review and tech commentary sector is woefully ill-equipped to talk about this longer term. I mean, we are hyped up on the embargo week, and then we are gone from that conversation. And I think it's leaving more and more people in the lurch. I think it's leaving more and more people behind when we're not doing our job in properly following up and really taking a look back and digging into manufacturers' claims and looking at the quality of the updates, not just the frequency of the updates. And that this stuff matters. And someone's going to spend $400, $500, $600, $700, $1,000, $1,500 on a product that was barely analyzed, barely reviewed the week it came out. That's not okay. So, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it really hasn't been as critical in the past as it is today. Like, the ability to get out there to drive some of these conversations, and less so online. Like, this is not about going to forums or Reddits or video comments and like mixing it up with people that, you know, don't really earnestly join these conversations. It's more about starting with your own family and friends. It really is, you know, like, someone's on an iPhone 11, they feel they're missing out because they don't have an iPhone 12. Maybe talk them out of it. Like, I'm usually not that direct, but you know, if their needs haven't changed, instead start playing the game. Can you keep the same amount of power in your phone but then spend less? And I think a lot of your family and friends are going to be very receptive to that kind of a game, to that kind of a conversation. And I think we'll be doing a better job of really listening to those people who are out there. They're shopping. Like, they're spending their money, and this money is tight, and their needs are very specific. And I don't think techies are listening to them. I don't think they're really trying to account for what it is that that person says that they need. So I'm preaching to the choir. Thank you for being good tech neighbors. Thank you for being good tech citizens. And I think that's the right note to walk out on. I'll probably be sort of live tweeting the XPERIA announcement. So that's going to be on the 14th. So let's all kind of watch that together. I hope to have more information out on the phone challenge. I'm going to follow up with Rode microphones and see if we can make some kind of collab happen and maybe do a giveaway. But I really want you all to be thinking about sharing, recording, documenting, you know, make a little podcast documentary about your experiences in quarantine. Don't wait for someone else to tell your story. This is a crazy year that, you know, a decade from now, we'll probably ask about, like, hey, what happened then? How did that go down? What was that like? And you don't want to rely on your memory. Like, I can't remember last year, my wife and I's wedding anniversary. Don't let that happen. Don't let this stuff kind of slip through your fingers. Your memories, your family memories, are more important than a few likes on social media. The stuff is real. It's not ephemeral. It's not fodder for some other machine to profit off of. This is the stuff that will matter to you as you get older. So I want you to do awesome with your technology. I want you to be awesome with your tech. I want you to do awesome with your tech. And I want to see everyone back here next week for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. Take care. Be well. Be safe. Just be safe. And as a really cheesy and corny, but honestly heartfelt recommendation. Be nice to yourselves as you kind of look around this ridiculous world that we've created of tech outrage, and know that, you got some pals out there. We're going to make it through. It's just going to get real weird while we're doing it. And I'll catch you back here next week. I love you all. Be well.